On the eve of Election Day, Democratic gubernatorial nominee for Texas, Beto O'Rourke, visited Texas A&M for a second time this semester. As the 2022 midterm election came to a close, many incumbent Republicans were able to hold their spots in Texas, but this wasn't necessarily the case across the country. And Texas A&M students give their reaction to Governor Greg Abbott's third term in office. I'm Caroline Wilburn, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Batt Signal. The day before Election Day, Democratic gubernatorial nominee for Texas, Beto O'Rourke, came to Texas A&M one last time to rally support for his campaign. Here to talk more about O'Rourke's rally is Assistant News Editor Kenzie Finch. Kenzie, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, Kenzie, can you tell us some more details about the event?
So students filled the Bethencourt Ballroom and the Memorial Student Center, or MSC, on Monday, November 7th, to listen to O'Rourke's second speech of the semester on A&M's campus. The first one taking place on Wednesday, September 8th in Rudder. During the event, hosted by Texas Aggie Democrats, O'Rourke criticized current policies and condemned current Governor Greg Abbott's decisions regarding gun control, abortion, the LGBTQ+ community, education, and more.
And what were some points O'Rourke made during this speech?
After being introduced by political science sophomore Lucinda Garcia, O'Rourke took the microphone and began reflecting on his campaign over the past year. He soon after began discussing recent school shootings that have taken place in Texas, and said Abbott has not taken steps to prevent this from happening again. O'Rourke said he can't accept the lack of background checks, training, and due diligence put in place by Abbott.
I think about those things that we cannot accept right now, like the fact that tomorrow will mark 24 weeks since 19 children and their 2 teachers were slaughtered in a classroom in Uvalde, Texas.
Okay, and did he mention his stance on any other political issues pertaining to Texas?
So yes, O'Rourke then went on to discuss his stance on recent abortion restrictions made in Texas. There is a maternity mortality crisis in the state of Texas that is 3 times more deadly for Black women, O'Rourke said. There is no exceptions for abortion in cases of rape or incest, and O'Rourke said he has heard stories where not even the life of the mother was reason enough for an abortion.
I have met women in this state, for example, who said, listen, I was pregnant. It was a planned pregnancy. We'd already chosen the name for our child, and we had some god-awful complication. That fetus was no longer viable. In fact, it was no longer alive. But because I was not yet close enough to death's door, under this extreme abortion ban, the doctor had no choice but to send me back home.
And then how did O'Rourke go about discussing LGBTQ+ rights in Texas?
So parents of transgender children are being accused of child abuse for affirming their child's identity, O'Rourke said. However, according to current law, same-sex couples can still legally adopt in the state of Texas.
You're too gay in Texas, according to the law, to be able to adopt a child if you're in a same-sex household. At least that form of discrimination, though not cool with me, is perfectly legal in the state of Texas.
Obviously, there were lots of students at the event, so did you speak to any of them?
Yes, I spoke with communications senior Briley Andrews, who said she found out about the event through the Battalion's Twitter and signed up to attend because she supports O'Rourke.
And so, obviously, we know that according to the polls, O'Rourke fell short of Republican incumbent Governor Greg Abbott. You can read the entire article on O'Rourke's visit to Texas A&M at thebatt.com or in our latest print edition on Stands Now. Kenzie, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Unofficial election results for both Brazos County and the state of Texas were released late Tuesday, November 8th, following the conclusion of the 2022 midterm election. In addition to the statewide elections that included the offices of governor and attorney general, local election results will determine how the city of College Station and Bryan proceed regarding transportation, the Northgate district, and infrastructure. Republicans were able to hold a majority of state seats, including incumbents Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Comptroller Glenn Hager. Across the country, millions of Americans voted on amendments, governors, mayors, and senators in the 2022 midterm elections. Though the Texas A&M community is most affected by election results from Brazos County and the gubernatorial race, here are 3 midterm election takeaways from beyond state borders. Here to tell us more is Editor-in-Chief Michaela Rush. Michaela, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what was so notable about this specific midterm election day?
So all across the country, there were all kinds of firsts. For example, Sarah Sanders was the first female governor of Arkansas. Wes Moore is now the first Black governor of Maryland. Maura Healey is Massachusetts' first, Maura Healey of Massachusetts is the nation's first openly lesbian governor. And we also had our first Gen Z congressperson, Maxwell Frost of Florida. So in addition to those specific wins, also this midterm marked the first time that members of the LGBTQ community ran for office in all 50 states, and we had an impressively high, record-setting number of women who ran for office, but governorships especially. So lots of firsts, very exciting.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about what's happening in Georgia right now, because the election is not finalized yet?
Yeah, so similar to how it was 2 years ago and 4 years ago, Georgia is really kind of one of the last holdouts and is going to be an important part of determining who has control of the Senate and the House in terms of, Republican versus Democrat. So there were 35 available Senate seats, and Georgia's Senate race was particularly interesting because one of the candidates, the Republican candidate, Herschel Walker, is a former pro football player, and he actually chose to run because Donald Trump recommended that he run. And surprisingly, he had a really tight race with the incumbent, Raphael Warnock, who is the Democratic nominee. And so because this race was so tight, neither candidates had 50%. And so now they've officially announced that Georgia is going to have a runoff election in December. So we won't know for a couple weeks who wins that seat. And then, like I said, that'll also give us a better idea of who is in control of the Senate specifically.
Yes, and then following the overruling of Roe v. Wade in June, how did states across the country react to that when it came to voting?
Yeah, so abortion ended up being one of the most important issues on the ballot, not only in terms of people deciding to vote one way or another for specific offices, specific candidates, but also Kentucky and Michigan both had abortion-specific legislation on their ballots. So in Kentucky, they had Amendment 2, and if Amendment 2 was passed, it would have removed abortion rights from their state constitution, but it did not pass. And then in Michigan, they had Proposal 3, which actually added right to contraception and abortion to their state constitution. So even in a place that's historically Republican, historically red, like Kentucky, abortion rights are something people really did go out and vote for and vote to protect across the country.
Okay, definitely very interesting and things to look forward to in the coming weeks. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Michaela.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
With over 98% of the votes in and Greg Abbott ahead of Beto O'Rourke by 11 points, the incumbent will hold his Texas governor seat for another term. With 59.7% of Brazos County reportedly voting for Abbott and 38.5% voting for O'Rourke, Texas A&M students shared their feelings about the gubernatorial election results. Here to tell us more about students' reactions to Abbott's third term in office is life and arts writer John Chapa. John, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So, this was obviously a big race in Texas. Were any students disappointed with the outcome?
Yes. Telecommunications Media Studies junior Diane Word said she felt extreme fear and disappointment after the poll results came in. Word said, quote, "Texans are unwilling to vote blue even though it's clearly voting for common interest and values. Republicans are voting for the party no matter the candidate. You should vote for the best candidate no matter what, not the party."
But were there any students pleased with the results?
Yes, political science senior Blake Martin said he wasn't surprised that Abbott came out victorious. Martin said, quote, "Leading by 11 points was what I expected. We saw a lot more voter turnout in South Texas than in previous years. I was impressed with the overall turnout."
So why do students think that this was the result?
Texas Aggie Democrats president and political science senior Christopher Livaday said he attributed Abbott's victory to his popularity and Texas' history of being a red state. Abbott is not Ted Cruz in terms of popularity. Livaday said, quote, "Abbott might be the most popular Republican in the state. Every election he's run, he consistently outruns every other statewide Republican. In addition to the year, and Texas being a pretty red state, and Abbott being one of the most popular figures, it was an uphill climb from the get-go. Greg Abbott is not Ted Cruz. That race came down to within 2 points because Ted Cruz is much less liked than Abbott is."
And are students looking forward to having Abbott in office for the next 4 years?
Martin said he's optimistic and hopeful about Abbott addressing some of the voting issues brought up in the gubernatorial election. Martin said, quote, "I hope that Abbott can decrease violent crime and secure the border more in Texas. I hope he'll make protecting schools a priority. Both in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate will be able to work with him on that."
Awesome. Well, only time will tell, so thank you so much for coming on, John.
Thank you again.
For more information on all the stories featured in today's episode, visit our website at thebat.com or pick up a print edition on stands every Thursday. This week's contributors are Kenzie Finch, Michaela Rush, and John Chappa. Make sure to check out previous episodes of the Batt Signal and Home Turf, available wherever you get your podcast.